Good morning. I'm Monica Benavides, Senior Staff Writer at the Worcester Business Journal. Some of you may recognize me, at least by voice in the last year, as the lead cannabis reporter at WBJ. And on behalf of WBJ and our event partners and sponsors, welcome to part 2 of the 2021 Business of Cannabis Forum. While we are in the midst of returning to live events now, we also recognize the convenience of offering this year's forum on Zoom. Today's forum promises a terrific program featuring several industry leaders, and we appreciate all of the speakers who have joined us for today's session and those who joined us for part 1 of this series that took place last Wednesday. While the WBJ team takes the lead in producing this event, it's not something we could do alone. We rely on a group of strong partners, and I would like to take a moment to recognize them. Beginning with our longtime partner and collaborator, Beth Waterfall of Beth Waterfall Creative. Our corporate sponsors, Bowditch and Dewey, and Lighthouse Biz Solutions, LLC, a subsidiary of GFA Federal Credit Union. And our community supporters, Elevate Northeast and Mass Live Media. Thank you all for your continued support of our programs like these. And I just have a few notes before I introduce today's keynote speaker. As a reminder, this event is being recorded and will be shared with all registered attendees after it's completed. To ask a question, simply type it in the Q&A box located on your screen. Our moderators will try to get to as many questions as possible during the discussion. You can find the speakers' full bios in the digital event program book, the link of which was sent in the Zoom reminder emails and is located on the WBJ website. Now, I'm happy to kick today's program off by introducing our keynote speaker, Shalene Title. Shalene is an Indian American attorney and longtime drug policy activist who currently serves as the Distinguished Practitioner in Residence at the Ohio State University College of Law, Drug Enforcement and Policy Center and is Vice Chair of the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition. From 2017 to 2020, she was appointed by the Massachusetts Governor, Attorney General, and Treasurer to serve as one of 5 inaugural commissioners on the Cannabis Control Commission. She was widely recognized during her term for her focus on racial justice and her efforts to make the cannabis industry more fair and inclusive. She is a frequent lecturer and consultant on cannabis policy and has testified in front of governmental bodies around the world about restorative justice in marijuana laws. Shalene, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first keynote speech in Massachusetts as a free woman, so it's great to spend this time with you. I'm a big fan of the WBJ. I'm a big fan of Monica's work in particular. I think that you've done a great job highlighting social equity, highlighting minority-owned businesses, and the way that the cannabis world is really kicking off in central Massachusetts. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's been a weird year. It's hard to talk about cannabis because it feels like there's so much out there that we can't ignore, right? And it feels like we're in the middle of history, and it's weird to be in cannabis at the same time as all this because it's all happening at the same time. And you know that when you're in cannabis, you're kind of used to being a part of history. And now it's everything else that is a part of history. And it's hard to digest it sometimes because, you know, you look back at the civil rights movement or these big moments in history and you wonder, did they know that they were in such a historic time, you know, and they probably didn't. So it helps to stop and remind yourself, I find, that you're in history, right? And think about how your future generations are going to look back. I am not a history buff at all, but I like to look back for that reason. And I like to read quotes and think about what people were thinking. And a big one that you will hear a lot, and you should hear a lot, is the quote from one of Nixon's staffers who talked about the drug war, right? And he talked about how they couldn't directly demonize Black people and hippies, so they used drugs to do that and to wage a war against them. And you keep that in mind and you think, okay, the most powerful people in the world created this drug war, right? And they did it over decades with unlimited resources. And if we couldn't dismantle it in a couple of months, there's nothing wrong with us. Let's keep all of that in perspective. So I always think about that. But lately I've been thinking about the 1920s a lot too. And I've been thinking about all the comparisons. I'm not the only person to say this, right? But there's a lot of similarities when you're coming out of a pandemic and you want to celebrate, but you can't ignore the historic inequities that we're seeing. And it doesn't seem to be changing. And it's overwhelming. There's a quote in particular that I think of that reminds me of Nixon staffer's quote. It's John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s quote, and it went, "Growth of a large business is merely a survival of the fittest, the working out of a law of nature and a law of God." And I imagine him with top hat and his monocle or whatever people wore in those days. And it reminds me a lot of the things that I hear today. But what does this have to do with cannabis, right? We're at a cannabis business forum. That's what I'm here to talk about. Well, if you're my age or younger, you can't even imagine a different world than the one that we've seen, right? All we've ever seen is greater concentrations of wealth for the super rich, and for everyone else, it's getting harder and harder to survive, to start a small business, to provide for your family, to have fair wages, unless you're in the cannabis industry, right? And that is why you might have hope, because you might have seen something different, right, in the past 5 years. And you might believe that everyday people really can change the world and they really can start something new. I was lucky enough to visit New Dia recently with Ross Bradshaw from Worcester. Major Bloom is here today. I knew Beth Waterfall right when she started. And I remember thinking, this is someone who's really going to go far. My friend and former colleague, Jen Flanagan, is with Vicente Cederberg. I actually opened their Massachusetts office, the first one outside of Colorado, like 10 years ago. And that was a really small law firm that was representing like the outlaws in Colorado. And now they're this huge law firm that really has gotten to where they are through merit. We have Black-owned national businesses, Black women-owned, like Chanel Lindsay's business, Ardent. We have veteran-owned social equity businesses like Freshly Baked. I was lucky enough to get one of their first deliveries last week. And I look at all of these businesses and you can see that it really is an economic democracy here in cannabis. If you work hard, if you have merit, you can get somewhere. And it's only going further and further that way as the most recent tweaks that the Cannabis Control Commission has made are going into effect. The new commission is going to make more. And we want to keep that. We want to keep that because this is bigger than us, right? If we look at the way that marginalized people and people being hurt by the drug war in particular are centered in our policies and in our discussion in Massachusetts, not just the way that we talk about it, but the way that it's actually unfolding, it's bigger than cannabis. Because if you're my age and younger, that's the only time you've seen that happen, right? And it's not words and speeches that give people hope. It's the actual concrete businesses that they see opening, marijuana businesses that are small, that they couldn't have imagined 10 years ago. And now they're opening and they're actually doing great things for their communities, and the sky hasn't fallen. And then perhaps people are wondering, what else can we accomplish? So this is a really big time in history, not just for people in cannabis, or not just because of cannabis, but for bigger reasons than that, and for what our work collectively, and all of you in the audience, what you're accomplishing in this economic democracy, what that means to people. And so we need to keep this going. We need to look forward as the industry in Massachusetts is growing. I mean, compared to the actual size of the marijuana market, and if you include the underground sales, which are still estimated to be the majority of sales that are taking place, we're still really small and we have a long way to go. And it's looking really positive, but things are going to change really fast, right? Connecticut just legalized, New York just legalized. Rhode Island is about to legalize, and they have one of the most exciting programs that I've seen. In addition to putting aside social equity licenses, as many states have done, they're looking at putting aside worker-owned cooperatives. It's like you look into the future, things that we didn't even think of. You might have a business that is not the traditional CEO worker model. We might have worker-owned cooperatives that are dominant, perhaps in some place in the future if we wanted to. And of course, we have co-ops in Massachusetts that are opening. But we have to keep this going. And the key thing that we learned in Massachusetts that we have to keep going no matter what is that when everyday people are involved in the policy, when you read the Worcester Business Journal, when you join the organizations, when you come to the commission hearings, that's when policy gets better. Because it's not what the 5 of us or our staff came up with over the past 3 years that were the best ideas. It was the people who were directly affected by our policies and the businesses in particular who came and told us what they needed. And we ended up implementing that. And we need to show that that has worked. And as we are getting regional legalization and eventually national legalization, we need to keep that same level of interest and of clarity in what we're looking for and what types of policy are going to support that vision that we have, because nobody is going to do it besides us. So I'll just close with a couple of projects that I want to tell you about. The first is, as Monica mentioned, I've been spending the past 6 months with the Drug Enforcement and Policy Center at The Ohio State University College of Law. And they were kind enough to support equity policy research, talking with other cannabis regulators around the country and looking at what has worked, what hasn't worked, what might be working, and putting all of that together into one resource that new regulators who are in the position that we were in will be able to use. And hopefully it will be really helpful for city officials as well, who don't have that much time to look at cannabis. And so we want to make that free and available to everybody. And also on federal legislation, I encourage you to take a look at a rewrite I did in the past couple of weeks that's also free and available to everybody at parabolacenter.com. And what it looks at is what a national marketplace might look like and how we can take that incremental step rather than just throwing open the floodgates immediately and opening it up to whoever today's equivalents of John D. Rockefeller Jr. are. What if we looked at interstate regional compacts between just us and our neighboring states, perhaps, or social equity licensees like the ones in Worcester being able to sell to their counterparts in other states. The point is for all of you to take your own ideas, right? Starting with that model, make your own tweaks, start your own dialogue, and make sure that you're getting involved in the policy details, just like you did in Massachusetts. Because once it happens, you know, as we've seen in this state, it's irreversible. And like I said, Worcester is probably the East Coast cannabis capital of the country right now. So if you're here, you have a very valuable perspective, and I hope that you will think about what you've learned as a person living in Worcester, as a person in this business, and I hope you'll be vocal about it, and I hope you'll think about the impact that it's going to make on future generations. So thanks again so much for having me, and I look forward to these wonderful, exciting panels coming up next.
Thank you so much, Shalene, for sharing your insight and for that call to action. Now it is time to get into our panel discussions. And I would like to introduce to all of you our moderator for this first session, Tina Sprague. Tina is the president of Lighthouse Biz Solutions, LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of GFA Federal Credit Union, formed to serve the legal cannabis industry. She previously served as president and CEO of GFA Federal Credit Union from 2009 until earlier this year. Recognizing the risks of a cash-intensive business poses for public safety, in 2018, GFA Federal Credit Union Board made the decision to bring compliant banking services to legal cannabis operators and their employees. As such, they were actually the first financial institution in the state to provide banking to both recreational and medicinal operators. Tina is regarded as an innovative industry leader and an engaged member of the community, having served as a director to many nonprofit organizations. So please welcome Tina Sprague, who will introduce our panelists, Mitzi Keating, partner at Citron Cooperman, Bill Perrier, producer at Charles River Insurance, Ellen Rosenfeld, president of ComCan, and Ulysses Youngblood, president of Major Bloom.
Good morning. Thank you, Monica, for that introduction. And it is an absolute delight to be here with everyone this morning. And I do want to give a big shout out to the Worcester Business Journal and also our panelists this morning. Our topic is building your ecosystem. We know that it takes a village. One of the famous sayings, it takes a village, and particularly as you're building out your cannabis business, you will find that you need to arm yourself with a lot of industry experts, whether it's banking, insurance, solid accounting advice, and the networking opportunities of working with others and talking with others within your industry. So I am extremely pleased to be here this morning and to have a group of outstanding individuals speaking on our panel. So to start, I'm going to ask that the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Mitzi, please.
Sure. Thank you, Tina, and thank you. Nope. Do you guys hear a double echo? All right, there we go. I've got it now. So thank you, Tina, and thank you to everybody in the Worcester Business Journal, and I'm pleased to be here today. So my name is Mitzi Keating. I am a CPA and a CFE, which is a certified fraud examiner, and I'm a partner with Citron Cooperman. And Citron Cooperman is the 22nd largest CPA firm in the United States, and I am the founder and co-practice leader of the firm's cannabis advisory practice within our firm. So what we do on a typical basis is we've been working in the cannabis industry for somewhere around 6 or 7 years at this point in time, working with clients who are startup companies all the way to multi-state operators, helping them really navigate the complexities of their accounting, their tax issues, and a lot of their just basic business issues that we deal with on a regular basis. So we speak your language. We're excited to be here, and thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, Mitzi. Bill, would you follow that, please?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, yes.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Tina. It's great to be here. Thank you for the Worcester Business Journal for having us. My name is Bill Perrier, just like the water from 40 years ago, but no relation. And I'm a producer over at Charles River Insurance in Framingham. I'm really excited to be here because our firm, the division of my firm that I work in, all we do is cannabis insurance. That's it. We don't do anything else. So we love to meet people. Some of the people on this panel we've met with and have done some work for. And it's just fantastic to be here. And I'm looking forward to answering any questions about, as we navigate the waters of insurance. It's a wild ride, and I hope to be a resource for you folks today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Bill. Ellen, would you go next, please?
Sure. My name's Ellen Rosenfeld, and my 2 younger brothers and I entered this business in 2015. And I believe that we are the only self-funded, fully integrated marijuana group in Massachusetts. We have a co-located, so we have our cultivation facilities in Medway. We have a co-located rec med in Millis, right over the Medway line. We have a med only in Southborough, and we have a license in Mansfield, which will be next, and a Rehoboth. We hope to open a Rehoboth rec only next month. In addition, we're women owned and gay owned.
Thank you, Ellen. And Ulysses, sitting in your establishment, which looks absolutely beautiful, would you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Tina. And looking forward to having everybody here come visit very soon. So I'm the president and co-founder of Major Bloom. We are here in Worcester, the heart of Worcester, right outside, a lot of stuff going on, Polar Park, right outside Kelly Square. We have multiple licenses here, which is why we call it the establishment. We have a retail license, which we're sitting in here, manufacturing, which is just a couple halls down this way. And then we should be on the agenda to get our provisional license for our delivery, because we're a economic empowerment business. So just happy to be here with you guys. And I live in Worcester. I teach in Worcester at Clark University as well in their cannabis program. So I just love networking with people and getting great feedback from other industry leaders. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, and best of luck to you and much success. As it was introduced, I'm Tina Sprague. I'm the president of Lighthouse Biz Solutions. We are a subsidiary of GFA Federal Credit Union, and we do provide cannabis banking in a compliant and service-oriented fashion to licensed cannabis operators, pre-operators, and I hope we get to talk about it today, but including employees and ancillary companies who are often shunned by financial institutions as well. So very proud to be a part of the industry and to see as Shalene said, it's an exciting time, and I think we're all very happy to be a part of it and to be making a piece of history, or to at least be a piece of that history. What other industry is creating the types of jobs and career opportunities and growth opportunities? It's been a long time since we've had a brand new industry in our economy. And that's a great segue into, building that economy and building that ecosystem. And Ellen, the first question I want to ask you, you are obviously, as you stated, you are an industry expert. You've been in the business for a very long time, and having started in the medical program. So can you, and this is probably like a 40-minute answer to the question, but succinctly, can you tell us what has been the most significant changes that you've seen?
I think, am I bouncing back on myself? The most significant changes is the opening up of the towns and cities and letting us in. When I started in 2015, all the doors were closed. You went to the town halls and you asked to meet their zoning person in charge of marijuana zoning, and they shut the door. I mean, you just went from town to town. That's all we did. We drove around and went from town to town. We had a map. We had X and X and X and X. I was mentioning the other day when we were just talking for a moment, 2 years ago, I got something in the mail, almost like an RFI from the town of Webster, putting out, we understand you're successful. Would you consider coming to Webster and opening up? I mean, that was the first really wow moment, how far we've come. Really, I mean, I know it seems like a lifetime ago, but it's really only been 7, 8, 9 years. And from having doors closed in your faces to come on and, let me introduce you to some of the landlords here. And, we'll sign an HC. That was incredible. But I'm owing it all. Listen, I'd love to say that they had a wake-up call and a nice moment. It all has to do with the money from the HCA agreement. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Towns are suffering out there. They see their neighbors getting whatever they can get and helping however they can help. And as much as people complain, I mean, God love the woman in Haverhill that's suing the town to undo the HCA. If it weren't for the HCA, there wouldn't be one of us out here. So I personally am for it. I have no problem giving my 3% to the town and watching them spend it however they want. And that to me has been the biggest change.
Thank you for that. And that is a drastic change from having doors shut to doors open is a significant difference in a relatively short period of time. So I'm going to switch over to someone that recently has just gotten licensed and gone through that application process. And Ulysses, my question for you is, can you tell the audience the greatest challenge? I keep asking these loaded questions that could go on, but the greatest challenge that you've encountered throughout your licensing process thus far. And I know you're not done with your licensing as you continue to expand, but thus far, what has been that greatest challenge?
It's a great question and an awesome question. And I think that, you know, the answer still kind of remains the same. It's really dealing with self-doubt early on, just because there's no clear path or clear direction. So you kind of question yourself as you go through this process. But once you get through, you know, understanding who you are as an individual, then you have to deal with other people's opinions. And everyone has an opinion about cannabis, whether you've been in the industry for a year or if you smoked weed for, I don't know, your whole life. So everyone's got something to say. And, you know, the regulations change pretty often, whether it be a local or at the state level. So just really keeping up with that. But I would say after the kind of like personal self-doubt and getting over people's opinions is definitely the raising capital side of things. You know, we've had a lot of deals on the table. We've had a lot of investors on the table, and ultimately we kind of turned internally to our own network and really saw the benefit and, you know, working closely with family and friends and even the local community rather than going out to the sharks of the world or the VCs or the private equity groups. So I think, you know, again, that comes with confidence in yourself. So we had to get through a learning experience to understand ourselves, to be able to stand up for what we believe in and get this done.
You talk about people's opinions, and I have to tell you that it took me several months, maybe a year or so, before I could actually call myself a cannabis banker. So
That's great.
Missy, to dovetail on Ulysses' comments about, you know, starting up a business, can you speak to the different tax implications between the different types of license holders? And if there are any, can you maybe provide us an executive summary?
Sure, that's also a loaded question.
I know, they all are.
You know, at least from the tax and accounting perspective, right? But I do want to just say, you know, it's funny, Ellen, as you mentioned with the municipality side, right? I actually was a local elected official. So that was how I ended up getting into the cannabis industry, was I was elected to the Board of Selectmen in my town in 2014. And I completely understand, because that opened my eyes to the business of cannabis as I was starting to work in cannabis. And I agree. Now it's night and day compared to where it was. So I think that's a great observation with the state itself. And it is based upon money, you know, in so many different ways. And then Ulysses, as you talk about the self-doubt and the issues and the concerns of the small business owner, I mean, we see it all day long, because as a certified fraud examiner, you are the target for so many people to try to take advantage of you over and over again. And so that confidence is so important to make sure that you have it, because it's a very long journey to get to, you know, where you are today. And so I just want to, you know, commend you for that, because there's so many people that are looking to try to, you know, take advantage of you, to try to get, you know, where you are with all the hard work that you've done. So, you know, that's what we like to see when we help our business owners and we see their success, because the small business is really the cornerstone of the cannabis industry. And we really enjoy working with those small businesses. But with that comes the issues of tax complications. And with regard to the cannabis industry, a lot of things that people don't know about it is that the industry is subject to a code section called 280E. And what that means is that you can't deduct your ordinary and necessary business expenses like a normal business, I would say. And I hate to say a normal business, right? Because a cannabis industry business is a normal business. But in a lot of cases, because you're trafficking in controlled substances, it's a Schedule I controlled substance still, the IRS doesn't look too kindly upon you as a business owner. So what happens in a dispensary, for example, it's different maybe from a cultivator, is that a dispensary, you know, if you think about it and you make, say you have sales of $1 million in a year, and your cost of goods sold, which is $500,000, because typically the margins on retail are still hovering around 50%, especially in Massachusetts. You know, you end up having a gross margin of $500,000. So Code Section 280E says no deductions or credits from taxable income are really allowed. but cost of goods sold is considered to be an adjustment to income as opposed to a deduction. So you actually get to take that on your tax return. So now as a business owner, you're going to be taxed on $500,000, even though you still have other expenses you've incurred. You're selling general administrative expenses, the cost of the individuals that are ringing the register, the bank fees that you're paying, to have banking privileges, the insurance expenses that you're paying, the utilities expenses. They're all non-deductible expenses. And what that means for the average cannabis business owner is it's very difficult with cash flow. So I think that's something that, as you look at, you could be paying upwards of 80, 90% in effective tax rates. We've seen that happen in other states. I think Massachusetts has done a really good job with the regulators in how, although a lot of people complained about how long it took to get a license, that really actually benefited the industry in Massachusetts because it allowed for more businesses to come online, to be profitable, to take portions of the legal market and not get overwhelmed by the fact that competition is very fierce in other states that just opened up their doors right away. And so if you have a very mature market in terms of supply and demand and multiple dispensaries being opened, in a very short period of time, it's very difficult to maintain positive cash flow. And we've seen businesses fail in other states that are more mature markets like Washington State, Oregon, Colorado, because they actually were paying the federal government essentially taxes to keep their business open. Because again, if you think about it from the perspective of a dispensary, if you have $300,000 of general and administrative and selling expenses, you had gross margin of $500,000, you only have $200,000 in theory left at the end of the day, but you're going to pay tax on $500,000. So, depending upon if it's a pass-through entity or anything like that, your taxes could be upwards of $225,000. You're actually paying to keep that license open. It's very difficult for these businesses. It's a little different if you're a cultivator or a manufacturer. You get to take advantage of allocating other costs, indirect and direct materials and overhead expenses under acceptable methods onto the cost of your inventory to give you cost of goods sold. But the IRS is nasty and they are very deep into these businesses. We haven't seen the audits come for the Massachusetts businesses really yet. They're coming because we're looking at the more mature markets where we get a lot more of our audit responses to the IRS coming through, Colorado, Nevada, California, but they're not very friendly. So the audit rate in these businesses is about 80%. So just be prepared as a business owner that this is coming. Just have good books and records. Accounting is actually your best defense against all of these adjustments from the IRS. So it's difficult. I'll stop there because I could go on for a long time.
Well, I am going to ask you to continue though, because I think
I will continue.
I think while we're on the topic of 280E, we often hear from clients that are forming subsidiary companies and different entities, multiple entities. So I'm going to ask you to comment because you talked about the IRS.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
So is it true or not true that if I'm a cannabis operator, I can employ strategies to get, and I'm going to use the term loosely, but to get around 280E?
Yeah, pretty much every time we talk to a client or we look at a structure that is a way by which people are trying to get around 280E, forming management companies, forming employment companies, forming, other entities within their structure, real estate rental, all trying to siphon money out of their existing cannabis company in this corporate structure. What we have to do is we have 2 court cases that exist. The IRS is very lenient on guidance that they issue. There's 2 court cases that have come out recently. And when I say recently, it's 2018 at this point in time. So the Harborside case and the alternative health case. And what they really kind of pointed to is the fact that if the IRS comes in and they determine that your big complicated structure that you've created is really there to serve one economic purpose, which is running a cannabis business, that they can extend their reach to all of those other entities you've created and subject them all to 280E. And so it's the worst case scenario if you've set up these management companies and you've charged yourself a management fee because you must pick up that income as income. You don't get to deduct anyways the management fee, on your other company. So you're not actually ever getting a benefit from doing so, but now you're getting penalized because of the double taxation on the artificial income that you've created within your own structure. We have never seen this succeed. With any IRS audit, Every time somebody's trying to play around 280E, you only get lucky if the auditor just gives up because maybe your books and records are so poor that they just make a blanket adjustment and maybe they didn't hit everything that's on there. It's really unfortunate because the IRS has not issued much guidance. One of the things that came out recently under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2018 was this concept of 471C, which was if you keep your books and records on a certain basis and you deduct everything as cost of goods sold on your books and records, that the cannabis industry kind of jumped on this and said, well, let's put everything in cost of goods sold because that's how I keep it on my books. And therefore, I'm going to just deduct everything under 471C. And then the Treasury regulations came out and they said, you can't make non-deductible expenses deductible using this methodology. So that whole theory, even though it still exists out there, is still something that people need to be aware of. The IRS does not look kindly on using 471C to take non-deductible expenses under 280E and make them deductible. It's a little complicated, but always happy with a follow-up for anyone who's really like a code section nerd.
Thank you. And, you know, I'm glad that you touched on this because today when we talk, you know, the panel is all about building an ecosystem. And I think hopefully as the audience hears from the industry experts, they're going to realize just how important it is to build their ecosystem and align themselves with people that are familiar with the nuances of the industry, which is a good question for Bill, because just like it's important to have a CPA that understands those nuances, it's equally important, I believe, to have an insurance company. So Bill, why is it important to work with a broker that specializes in cannabis insurance compared to one that thinks cannabis is the new shiny toy in the market and looking to capitalize on the industry?
Well, thank you for that question, Tina. That really sums up what we're about. As I said at the outset, we specialize in cannabis, every aspect of it. And there are a lot of guys and gals running around saying that they're specialists. You go on their website, you don't even mention the word cannabis, but they're specialists. And they have one or two kind of minor league carriers. We are the exclusive broker of a company called Safer out of Brentwood, Tennessee. What they do is cannabis insurance. We don't do anything else. We work with CanGen, again, out of West Coast outfit that just does cannabis insurance. So compared to the other guys, we have several other carriers I won't mention right now. But what I do is I go in and I do 2, 3, 4 proposals for people. And we talk about the good, bad, and the ugly, because there is good, bad, and the ugly with everybody. No one's perfect. Some have more good, some have more bad. But you have to go with someone who knows the exclusions, who's got several $1 million worth of business already underneath their belt, who has a CEO who's founded our program a few years ago and who supports it and wants us to go out there and do it. Doesn't kind of, you know, gee, it's just a fad. We're really completely invested in that. And that's what I can show my clients as opposed to someone else that comes in and says, well, you know, I got 10 things in my bag and one of them is cannabis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ulysses, we know that the journey is long. We use that term often because it is a long journey. You have to have a lot of patience, tenacity, grit, determination, and confidence, as you said, from securing the location, completing the application, and everything in between before you finally get that commence operations letter. And you're there. So again, congratulations. Where have you found that you've had to commit your focus to avoid as many obstacles as possible? And what would be that one greatest piece of advice would you offer for others to follow?
Not great at advice. I can speak from experience for sure. But I would say, you know, part of, you know, the biggest thing is loyalty. I mean, it sounds so cliche or very kind of, I guess, blunt, but like, you know, as I mentioned before, just looking within, you know, someone's network, I mean, it's all there. Everything's in abundance. So there was a while where I felt like I had to go out there and network with so many people to get this done. But ultimately, you know, it stayed within, you know, people that I knew, grew up with and known for a long time, who were able to provide resources and expertise in certain areas that are not even specific to cannabis, right? Like, you know, one of the biggest costs in any cannabis venture is just building out a facility. You know, that's just construction. You know what I mean? So like, why should we have to go to someone who, I don't know, is trying to look at this new vertical, as you guys have mentioned, is a new shiny toy, when, you know, I can work with someone who's built out, you know, maybe a restaurant before, or a retail establishment, if you will. And I think that was the biggest thing that I started to realize, is that there's people that I already know who have certain expertise in certain things, and we can just kind of educate them on the cannabis side, but they can educate us on filling gaps that we have and that I don't have experience in, like real estate. You know, I put a down payment on a property, you know, a while ago without any real estate experience, but then I got a college education going through that and working with people in my network who has had success in real estate. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that like you can be loyal to the group that you have. And that's, you know, my partner now, many of you know Lori Lucien. She's one of the greatest influences that I've ever met in my life, let alone in cannabis. But we've been working together for 4 years, and I can call her right now. She'll read off regulations and tell me her interpretations or whatever it may be. So I think it's very helpful to stay loyal to a group of people and not try to like work with, you know, everybody. You know, got to stick to a core and just keep going.
Mm-hmm. Stick to the work, the plan the work. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just an aside, as I was thinking about opening your establishment, it's a very unique labor market today. So is it easy to secure employees to work for a cannabis operator?
I'm sorry, were you asking me, Tina?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, in abundance. I get calls, emails, people who show up at the door when you opening. And I think it's different for us, to be honest with you, because we're in an area that is much different than like your main street location. Like, you know, we're surrounded by what's considered by the state, you know, census tracts or you know, areas that have been impacted by prohibition, low income, you know, people live in our neighborhood. So I think for us, it's very natural, especially being a black owner in this space. It's very natural for people to walk up to me every day and be like, "What's up? Like, you're gonna have work for me." I think it's very natural for friends and family or people who follow us on social media to reach out and be like, you know, "I'm here if you need help," even if it's just taking out trash. You know what I mean? So I guess to answer your question, I'm almost overwhelmed, and I feel a strong commitment to get this place open, because there are a lot of people who are like, you know, waiting and depending on us. So, but my perspective is different. I hear it's a lot different for other operators to find, if you will, diverse and good employees. But for me, it's an attraction thing, and for us, it's an attraction thing. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Sounds like you've created an air of excitement as well. Thank you for that, Ulysses. Ellen, can you comment on this on staffing? I don't know how many employees you have all together for all of your different locations. Has staffing been a challenge in this market?
We have 130 employees right now. And we're hiring every minute of every day. And I have the opposite experience of Ulysses. We are having, but I'm hearing this in every industry. Cannabis isn't the only one hit. All of the trades are hit right now. Service industries. I don't think we're any different on that. We're having a very, very, very difficult time. We get a lot of applicants. You know, they have to go through a very rigorous background check. And I hate to say it, we lose a lot to that. And they're not really forthright. So we spend a lot of time waiting for that to come back, and then we lose them. And it's a very difficult, through COVID, we had a very, very difficult time, particularly in our retail establishments, with dealing with the public. You know how politicized it became, and they're the face, and we've had to ban people. And it's been a very trying time through COVID and the mask mandate and the social distancing and policing. And keeping them outside and keeping them protected. We lost quite a few employees to the stress of it, but we got through it, and right now we're better on the other side. So, but I've never seen employment situation like this in my 50 years of working so far. So, and I don't know I don't see an end in sight. So good luck to Ulysses on that, because that's incredible. But I want to jump on what else you said about the loyalty thing. I want to say the most important thing, if you're thinking of doing anything in this business, is my advice to anybody would be to turn off the noise. There is so much noise in this industry from people that know nothing, that can take you off your path and turn you upside down, because it is so stressful to be in an industry that is so overregulated, and even the regulators are unsure of their regulations, that if you stop too much and overthink some of these things, you lose time, you lose money. And as you know, not only are we in an industry that's brand new, but we got to hurry up, because, you know, you're going to be 20 more open tomorrow and then 30 more the next day. We need to establish ourselves now with a brand, with a presence. We need to be good, a good product, good staff, good everything. So not only are we in a hurry, we're doing it in an environment that seems to be at odds with us. So if you can make a plan and try to follow it, even when you get smashed from the left and to the right, everybody got a new idea. Everybody want to help me, right? They all want to help me, you know, except they don't know how to help me, but they all want to help me. You really need to turn off the noise and follow your path, because your gut is right. You know what works for you. And I'm going to bring in the other people. I'm going to bring in the accountant and the tax person and the insurance person. If you can afford, that's the hard thing at the beginning, because you don't have a lot of money. You're not open yet. So you don't have the income to hire the people you need. But you really do need a tax person. And you really do need an insurance person, because you can end up paying 100 times of what you need, and you really need to be covered. And
I'm right here, just so you know, the insurance guy.
I know, but you can skip because you don't have the money, and then something happens and you're done. You know, one little thing happens and you're shut down. I mean, listen, when the governor shut us down for those 2 months, I thought it was the end of the world. So things like that can happen, and you need to prepare. You need a tax person to protect you, and you need an insurance person to protect you. You need a good attorney to help you understand the regulations, who's done it before. And beware of people that have had one client over the last 10 years and call themselves an expert. I mean, we were all experts 10 years ago, right? Because we did one thing. You really, really need to stay true to who you are, to your vision, and try to get as much help from knowledgeable people as possible. That's my advice.
I think that's excellent advice, and spoken from a veteran that has been there and been through the trials and tribulations. So I hope that everybody takes that wisdom to heart. I want to follow up on when you were talking about, you know, finding the right CPA firm and finding insurance. And you were talking about, you know, the cost of insurance and needing to get someone that's really going to protect you. And I want to comment because at GFA, when we started banking the cannabis industry, we learned that our directors and officers, our D&O coverage, was going to have an exclusion, and that all of our officers and all of our directors were not going to have that insurance protection, simply because we were banking the industry. And so we had to make the decision to just go without that coverage because our D&O was going to have that exclusion. So Bill, I don't think that GFA was an anomaly. And I think I'm going to ask you to comment about, you know, as a follow-up to Ellen, it's not just finding someone that understands how to insure your product or your property, but also making sure that, you know, if you're buying insurance, when you go to need it, you don't find out that you have all these exclusions. So can you comment on that a little bit, please?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely.
I'd love to. Thank you. Yeah,
You can put a policy together and put numbers on a page, but we do our darndest to go over all the exclusions and explain it to people. I've even talked myself out of a couple of deals in my career because once we looked at the exclusions, they just were not right for the customer. But I want to talk a little bit about D&O since you brought that up. That's directors and officers coverage. Everybody knows what that is. You protect your directors and officers and their spouses if applicable. And what happens is these D&O policies, they're like mining for gold. They're not available a lot. No one wants to do them in the cannabis industry because they're high premium, over mid six figure premiums many times that people don't want to pay. But the alternative is if you get sued, you really could go bankrupt. And remember, it's your personal assets you're going after, not the regular, the regular employees, the tellers and the janitor and those. It's the high level executives. Their houses are on the line. So you have to make sure if you get a D&O policy, it's just not thrown together with, here it is, good luck, over the exclusions, or what I call the limitations. And if I may, Tina, I want to talk on two key limitations on the D&O that a lot of folks don't know about. When you're filling out an application, it's usually an executive in their office filling out an application, and they're asking about prior acts of all the, say, 10, 15, 20 people on the board. Well, no one knows. You don't walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, have you been arrested? 3 years ago?" You don't know. Were you brought up on charges of something? You don't know the prior acts. So you just fill it out and say, "Yeah, everybody's clean." And then something happens, and voila, they do their background check, and the coverage is rescinded. It's called misrepresentation in the business. Whether you meant to do it or not, you didn't do your due diligence and do the homework. So the policy is no good. Now you're going to get sued. And it's really bad news. So you have to do something. You have to have an agent in there that negotiates something called prior acts coverage. You say, "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Insurance Company, I want my client to have prior acts coverage." What that does is it gives you a blanket to go back a certain amount of time and cover those folks, even if they did have some indiscretions or something bad happened to them. The other one is people think, well, if I'm in a lawsuit, the policy will just kick in up to the limit of the lawsuit. Say it's $5 million. It'll just kick in and cover me. Not so. Buried in deep in like page 79 of a 121-page policy that nobody reads. Let's face it, nobody reads. It says you can only get a portion of the coverage, And you're like, "Well, I thought I was covered." Again, you didn't read the limitation. That's my job to do that. So you have to negotiate something called 100% acts coverage. It means as long as some of the settlement is covered, then the whole thing is covered up until the limit, in this case, $5 million. So many times people think they're covered, paying all the money, and they're only covering like 20% of the payout. So you really, really have to know. You have to meet with someone who is an insurance geek and studies this and lives and breathes it to know these things. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm watching the Q&A too. So if anybody in the audience has questions, feel free to jot them down. And if time permits, we will answer them. And on that note, there was a question that actually came in for Ellen before the session even started. And Ellen, the attendee, wanted to ask, how did you decide to get into the cannabis business? And how did you set up your insurance program? So maybe Bill and Ellen can piggyback on that second part of the question.
It's hilarious because I just got a text from my insurance guy that he's watching, and he said I haven't plugged him yet. So I think I'm just going to piss him off and not plug him. I'm with Corcoran, Haviland, and Sawyer. They've been my insurance agent for 1 million years for all my other entities. I'm in real estate, so I have shopping plazas and things like that. And they educated themselves and got into this right at the get-go. And they've been terrific. So I don't know if Bill's knows who they are, but
I do.
they have been, like I said, they were one of the first. I admire these people that got in on these peripheral parts, you know, the people that did the insurance and the law firms that opened up a branch rather than say, no, I'm anti-cannabis, see you later. Well, they're all in it now, so congratulations. But the ones that got in it right at the get-go, I admire. They educate themselves, they did the work, and now they're big in the cannabis industry. So I'm happy about that. How I got into this is a story that could take a whole podcast by itself. It is the most ridiculous story in the world. I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell. I was taking a chimney down in my house, and the chimney sweep that was there to clean it out for me prior had an application in front of the town, and we got to talk, and we talked. I was there with him for 9 hours, and at the end of the conversation, he convinced me I should do this. And I kid you not, I ended up researching it, and the program was closed. And then I said, I'm out. And then a year later, I bumped into him at a 7-Eleven, and he said to me, have you done anything yet? And I said, no. And he said, well, you need to do. I ended up doing it because I took a chimney down in a house. I mean, ridiculous. That was 2015. And now we're I think one of the more successful players in the industry because it just happened to happen. So
serendipity.
And people that have known, my two brothers and I hardly know how to spell marijuana, but I'm learning. So it was more of a business decision. We were in the right place at the right time. We're real estate people. We know how to, schmooze and get permits and things like that. We also happen to own all of the real estate in our cannabis business, except for the Southborough. We bought everything. So that's a plus. We're not beholden to landlords. So very lucky.
Congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
never know where that taking the chimney down is going to bring you.
It's crazy.
Don't do any more construction
Don't
in your
worry.
house.
Don't worry. I can't afford it.
Ulysses, can you talk about, so you've got a couple of licenses under your belt. There's a few new licenses from the Cannabis Control Commission, delivery operators, couriers. Might be an obvious question, obvious answer, but for those that are with us today, what is the least expensive license and operations to secure? And is your advice to start with any one particular license and grow from there if someone was very interested in pursuing this business opportunity?
Yeah, and I think you just said it right there. Business opportunity. So we can look aside from these man-made laws that we put up and CCC and all this stuff, right? But like, I think the biggest thing I can admire for people who want to get started is even like licensing deals. So that is, I'm thinking of Leah and Sia who work with a couple groups to produce an idea that they have. So they don't own a license. And I can speak to this because we have people who approach us all the time with our manufacturer's license and they say, hey, we want to partner with you. We don't want to do what you did for 4 years and chase a license. Let us use your license and produce product together. You know what I'm saying? So I think what you just said, the business opportunity is in thinking outside of, these man-made licenses that we create. But to better more directly answer your question, I think, the delivery carrier is obviously a low barrier license, but it still has its issues. I would say that even that, like I met with a couple groups who have raised more money than I've raised for 4 licenses, and they haven't even gotten their license, and they've raised $2, $3, $4 million for just a courier license. So I think the industry is so volatile and so like widespread that, I can speak to our experience in acquiring 4 licenses without even closing on funding. Or you can be someone who raised a lot of money and for 1 license. So it really depends on your I guess your willpower, your network, and kind of what your vision is. But I guess, you know, the courier is probably going to be the lowest barrier of entry, but it still comes with significant barriers for sure.
Mhm. Thank you for that. We've got a couple of questions that are coming from the audience, and I want to go back to a question for Bill. So you were talking about the application process, Bill, and being, you know, transparent. And commented on some of the prior acts that could jeopardize insurance coverage. Can you give an example or two of those prior acts that would jeopardize?
Sure. It has to do with disclosure. So say I work for, let's just say, a bank, not your bank, let's say the old Fleet Bank, dinosaur there. And I had an insurance claim that I submitted that and we had to pay a claim of, let's say, $100,000 for, employment practices liability. Someone got sexually harassed, unfair termination, the EPLI stuff. Now I'm at a new business and I'm filling out a new application, and I claim that nothing like that has ever happened to me. I've never filed a claim. It's a prior act that I'm misrepresenting. So you want to make sure you have to be honest, because they're going to find out. Okay, that was one example. The other example is someone's filling out the form and they don't really know if anyone has had a claim, because there's just so many people to insure, say a 20-member, 10-member board of directors. It's kind of hard to go and like, where did you used to work? And just keep going back and back and back. What happened? So they just out of time, they just put no, and hopefully nothing will ever happen, right? And 99% of the time, nothing does happen. But it's when you get caught that the walls come down. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
One question that also came up, and I think I want to present this question to Mitzi. So we know that the Mass Cannabis Control Commission provides tremendous resources for licensing. But are there other important resources or information that you might recommend for a budding, no pun intended, cultivation micro business trying to navigate the pre-licensure?
Yeah, so
I was going to say I just have a 5-minute warning, so we've got to.
all right, I'll make it quick and try to answer as best as possible. So really, as you look to pre-licensure, you have to make sure that obviously your standard operating procedures are in place. You have to make sure that your business plan is in place. You have to make sure that your, accounting is in place, your structure is in place, and all of these things. But for the most part, as simple as you can make it, the easier you will have it. You'll need to make sure that you're in compliance with everything that you're stating. And so I think, as you try to navigate these waters, as Ellen had said too, time is of the essence. You need to kind of make sure that you're just going down the simple road as simply as possible. You're getting all your questions answered. And I think in a lot of cases, forums like this result in you getting to know people that are willing to help you in certain ways. I mean, we'll take phone calls. We'll talk to people about, hey, do I have a referral for a bank? Do I know someone in payroll? Do I know somebody X, Y, and Z, someone who's doing insurance? And so just, start to really get involved in the industry and network with the people, show up, be there. I mean, I think COVID's been a tough road for us because we haven't been able to see those people in person. We haven't been able to do those networking events, but it's really just talking to people who have been in the industry. And I think, the industry is very good about giving back. And I think that's been something that we've been really pleased to see in a lot of ways, is that there are people that are willing to work together on it to really kind of help the industry. And we always say as CPAs, our job really is to help professionalize the industry because of the terrible reputation it's had for so many years. And if we can step up and help people really, understand that this is a legitimate business, this is a real business, you need to understand, all of the tax implications and the bookkeeping implications. That's our role, as professionals serving the industry, is to kind of be there. I'll stop there. I know one of the things with what Bill was saying with the D&O insurance, and I just want to put this point out there, make sure that you are following your plan, as Ellen said too, and that you have a plan. Because the other thing that we're seeing a lot of now are lawsuits related to the cannabis industry. So that D&O insurance is very important. It's very expensive, but we're seeing more and more of this come to fruition over and over again. And I do litigation support. And so I see a lot of these cases, and it's really coming out from either not necessarily misrepresentations, but expectations that weren't met because people that were getting involved in the industry didn't understand the industry itself. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, what I would say, obviously, is we've all touched on, networking as a valuable resource. I think there's 2 other words that I would leave everyone with, and we've talked about that as well, compliance and transparency. I think collectively, whether you are in the cannabis industry or serving the cannabis industry, we are all, I say this to our clients all the time, we are all in this together. And if one of us trips, we all trip with them. So the best way for us all to be successful is by being compliant and being transparent and, disclosing what your intentions are and operating within the confines of the numerous regulations and policies and procedures that we all have to comply with. I think our time is up, so I would like to just ask anyone on the panel. I know we had several questions that we didn't get to. I hope the audience gained a lot from your wisdom, and just ask all the panelists if there's any parting comments that you'd like to make before we really go over our 2-minute warning that came 5 minutes ago. I know Ulysses would say just keep the faith and keep on going.
Well, yeah, that. And just thanks for having me. I see there is a question here about retail. I will just say attrition rate and really focusing on people first. For us, our situation is a little different where there's no crazy board. You know what I mean? It's just me and a couple friends here. So I feel like programming around making sure people want to be here rather than worrying about bottom line is going to be huge for keeping attrition rate down, to answer the question from Matt Griggs.
One final thing, if you're looking to get in touch with any of the panelists, I believe the Worcester Business Journal has our contact information within the program book. So feel free to go to that program book or reach out to the Worcester Business Journal, and Chris will be happy to provide, or Monica will be happy to provide our contact information.
Yeah,
so the panelists.
I'd like to.
Oh, go ahead, Ellen. I'm sorry.
I'd like to add to something. I've helped quite a few people. People do reach out to me, particularly women. Men can reach out to me as well. I will talk to anybody. Seriously, I will talk to anybody. If you get my cell phone, my email, I've had conversations with people all over the state, how to get in, how to get open. Don't send me an email and ask me, which pre-roll is better than another. I don't know that information, but I can help you. I can help you navigate this business probably better than most because I did it. And I will give you my time. I've said that from the beginning, and I will continue to do that. So I will be open to anything, and don't think other than the product. You can ask me anything. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And again, thanks to the Worcester Business Journal for allowing us to provide this panel for you. I hope everybody has a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Tina and panel. That was a great conversation, very informative. And it's now my pleasure to hand things over to Beth Waterfall. Beth is an entrepreneur who wears several hats. She is the founder and executive director of Elevate Northeast Events and Education, Inc., a nonprofit that creates education programs to help end stigma against the people who use and work with cannabis, and to foster an inclusive and compliant industry. She has been a thought leader and an expert source for a number of regional and national media, and is a frequent speaker at cannabis industry and marketing events. Beth has also taken a leadership role in assuring that the cannabis sector is both compliant and inclusive. A Holden native, Beth is a real cheerleader for the Central Mass region and has been instrumental in helping put together today's program. So thank you, Beth. Please welcome Beth Waterfall, who will introduce the panel, which includes Elias Diesler, who is a digital artist, developer, and web designer, Alex Mazin, President and CEO of Bud's Goods and Provisions, and Gareth Charter, Vice President of Sales at Mass Live Media.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you, Monica, for the introduction. And welcome to all our panelists. Thank you all in advance for being here and sharing your insight and your time today. We are kicking off panel number 2. This is Don't Get Lazy Now, Differentiation in the Increasingly Competitive Cannabis Industry. And it's certainly, timely to talk about this. Every month that the CCC is approving new licenses, and competition is absolutely growing here in Massachusetts. So the purpose of today's conversation is to kind of give some information about that competitive landscape, and then talk about the ways that this group of business leaders here are helping their clients or their businesses differentiate in the marketplace. Before we get into the conversation, just quick introductions from our speakers. We have Gareth Charter, who's the Vice President of Sales at Mass Live, and he works with a variety of clients across the cannabis industry, helping with their marketing and advertising solutions. We have Elias Diesler, who's an artist working, he designs packaging for Mayflower Medicinals, which is located in Worcester and Alston, Massachusetts. And then Alex Mazin is the CEO of Bud's Goods dispensary in Worcester and Abington, Massachusetts. So before we get into the conversation, I'm just going to want to go around and ask everybody just to give a quick introduction about themselves and a little background on their business and how we got here today. So we'll start with Gareth. Welcome, Gareth.
Thank you, Beth. And thanks to the Worcester Business Journal for organizing this event. I thought that first panel was great, and I'm really pleased to be with the other folks here and continue a really great conversation. Mass Live is our news site. MassLive.com has been covering, the legalization of cannabis in Massachusetts for 5+ years. Our readers have really come to expect to get a lot of great quality content on our site as to what's coming in the industry. Mass Live Media is our brand that we use for our agency, our digital marketing agency and full service advertising and marketing agency. We began working with cannabis clients probably in 2019 was the first where we started helping some businesses that were open with their advertising and marketing. Since that time, we've got dozens and dozens of clients. We've served tens of millions of ad impressions for cannabis clients in Massachusetts. We've helped them with social media, video production, video distribution, content strategies, creative, just really been very, very immersed. Talk to our clients all the time about a lot of the things that we heard from the first panel about the challenges that they're facing in their business. We've advised the CCC on their marketing regs. I'm thinking back to what Ellen said about some of the regulators don't even know the regulations. In fairness, why would the regulators understand the marketing regulations? The terminology that they used initially was so archaic to describe, what could be done for marketing. So we've advised the CCC, which we're happy to do. We're pushing other marketing vendors to become compliant and do the things necessary to open up the options for cannabis businesses so that they can take advantage of other marketing solutions, pushing some of our vendor partners to do what's necessary so that we can bring some business to them. And then lastly, we did what we think was the first research on the cannabis consumer in Massachusetts last fall. We went out and talked to cannabis consumers, asked them why they were shopping, where they were shopping, what was important to them. And I can share out some of those results as the conversation goes along today if appropriate. And we plan on doing a redo of that research very soon. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Gareth. All right, Elias, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thank you for having me. Really an honor to be here among all of such knowledgeable individuals in the business. I just recently made a foray into the cannabis industry by doing this product design for Mayflower, thanks to their Artist Spotlight series that they have going on. So I was able to do 3 different label designs for them. The second one that just came out. But prior to doing that, I have my experience is actually in the video game industry. And presently I am a contractor. So I do web design full time. But I was able to do I wanted to actually hop in to the Spotlight Series opportunity for Mayflower because I actually initially thought it was a pro bono gig. $1 from every jar that they would sell for those would go to charity. So kind of like Ulysses was mentioned.
We'll let Elias unfreeze.
Am I good now?
You're back, Elias.
Okay.
You froze for a second. All good, all
Sure.
good.
Sorry about that. Where should I pick up?
You were mentioning that you're a contractor working with video games.
Oh no, yes. So I currently do web design as a contractor, and before that I was doing video games for 7 years. So that's where my experience lies. But I did want to bring my my artistic skills into the cannabis industry when I had the opportunity because it benefited my local community. You know, the dispensary that I go to, Mayflower, really, you know, they made the decision to get involved in a couple of social equity programs like the Last Prisoner Project and the Artist Spotlight series that goes towards unbound visual arts. So it just made me really happy to see that my local dispensary, you know, wanted to do that. So I'm sort of here to represent graphic design and how it is involved in marketing with cannabis, and maybe help answer some questions about the difficulties designing around, you know, kind of the ambiguous regulations we've been talking about, and, you know, marketing something to customers that is acting as both a medical product and a recreational product. So again, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Elias. And Alex, welcome, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Bud's Goods and Provisions.
Hi, Beth. How are you? Thank you for having me. A little bit about myself, Alex Mazin, CEO and founder of Bud's Goods. Our first dispensary opened back in November 2020 here in the city of Worcester. I'm a native of Worcester. I grew up here from little boy all the way up until college, and then I went off to become an adult, I guess you can say. My endeavors started after college. I immediately moved to New York City, where I went into the healthcare industry as a consultant. My focus was emerging markets and emerging technologies. I did that for about 8.5 years, so that really gave me my experience on a professional corporate level in understanding. Simultaneously, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I've been always trying to start businesses. Many have failed, few have succeeded. But I really started dabbling in the cannabis market maybe in 2009. I started my first venture. I was selling glass, smoke accessories online. Back then was very difficult. No merchant payment processor ever wanted to work with us. And the idea was, it was almost as illegal as selling cannabis itself online back then. Long story short, fast forward to 2014, I started my first successful venture in the cannabis space called Vapor Case. We created a product similar to an iPhone case for an iPhone. We created silicone accessory cases for vaporizers such as PAX and Grenco Sciences. Ended up doing our first big deal with a large distributor. Our products went into over 3,000 stores here in the US and in Canada. In 2016, I was approached by a family friend to get into the medical industry. Obviously picking Massachusetts because this is where I'm from and where I grew up. Started learning what it required to actually participate in the cannabis industry under the medical regulations. And then in 2016, the legalization of marijuana really shifted gears. And I thought to myself, it's too expensive to be vertical. I can't raise the money. Let's focus on one siloed sector, which was retail. And let's try to make something really special in a place where, you know, I myself would want to shop. And so we went on this endeavor, and I, you know, saw Worcester had opened its RFP process, and I figured I have to win at home, you know, home court advantage, have to play into it. So I did, and I was fortunate enough to receive a host community agreement here in Worcester. So fast forward to today, Bud's Goods has its second retail store open just recently, 6 weeks ago in the South Shore in the town of Abington. We're working on our third store, which will be in Watertown for this fall. And then we have a few other projects up our sleeves that we're trying to really figure out where we want to go from there after we get our 3 retail stores, since regulations limit each of us to 3 retail stores as our max. So understanding both the corporate healthcare world, but also having the entrepreneurial spirit and the passion for cannabis, it just seemed like a perfect fit. And this is the industry that I'm intended and believe I should be a part of. So I'm excited to answer any questions and help people find their way into this industry in any manner that, they can.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex, and congratulations on the new store opening and the new store coming. All right, so I'm gonna just ask Chris to share. We're gonna just go through some quick data sets. We're marketing people, we like data, we like to know what we're up against now, right? So next slide, please. This is just, this slide and the next slide are just some images of some of the products that are out there. And I wanted to put these out here because I understand we have some folks who maybe aren't working in dispensaries or working in the industry as intimately as some of us on the panel are today. So this is just, these are some of the products that are out there. We've got Lil Buds represented here, with the exception of Lowell Smokes in the upper left corner there. These are all Massachusetts products too. So you can see the packaging is lovely. They look different. Their branding is there. Lowell Smokes is a California company that's now in Massachusetts. They have a licensing agreement, I believe, with Ascend. Next slide, please. And here are some more. Again, these are mostly Massachusetts products. Kiva is from California. Mindy's is from Colorado, I believe. But that's from, Mindy's is an example of a large MSO, Cresco, that worked with a James Beard award-winning chef to create some edibles. And then you see up in the corner there, Pabst Blue Ribbon, even they're getting into it. So, this is just to highlight that these brands, these companies, these products are out there and competition is getting fierce. Next slide, please. Some of the notes, some themes really about competition. So we have more licenses obviously being approved monthly by the CCC here in Massachusetts. And most of the competition, as you'll see in the next couple slides, relate to retail, cultivation, and product manufacturing. We also have that influx of out-of-state brands, increased M&A activity, and then celebrity brands. We're seeing more. Last week or the week before, it was announced that Paul Pierce has his Truth brand coming out in Massachusetts. So things are getting pretty exciting here from a marketing perspective. Next slide, please. So this is, as you can see, this is from the CCC's June 17th meeting. This is the number of licenses that have been approved by category. And so just highlighted, you have cultivator, manufacturer, and retailer are those big concentrations of licenses here in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. And then this one may be a little bit harder to read, but this is the licenses kind of by their status. But again, you can just see those numbers across the board, really high for cultivation, product manufacturers, and retailers. So that's really where this conversation is gonna hone in on for today. Next slide. These are just, again, more numbers to highlight. These are applications that have been submitted. So these are the ones that are more imminent that we'll be seeing. So the numbers are, we're going to see the marketplace here in Massachusetts really transform as these come online. Next slide. All right, and it's not just, the competition between the licenses, but your customers and the media in particular right now have some pressure to be looking for differentiation and to be supporting companies and brands that are doing good stuff. We also have more customers in general that, they're starting to try a new product, cannabis product, maybe for the first time in their life. We also see experienced consumers that are really calling out businesses for maybe inflating what they were going to do, how big they were going to be, and how good they were going to be from a corporate social responsibility impact perspective. So we're getting more educated. There's more competition. So again, conversation about differentiation is perfectly timely here. Next slide, please. This slide here, as just thinking about differentiation, how there isn't a lot of differentness at the licensing kind of basic status here. So if you look right at the bottom of this is disadvantaged business enterprises, and this is for Massachusetts again specifically, but we've got a very large percentage of businesses here that are not kind of by virtue of who owns them different. I guess that's the point we're trying to make here. Next slide, please. And then the first panel, I was so glad to hear touch on this a little bit about the people inside, employee turnover. Ellen was talking about this, how it's hard to hire people. And then of course, you know, there's all these businesses opening. So people, you know, the shiny next thing, your employees are, you're training your employees only to go on and work for a competitor. So interestingly, the cannabis industry as of April 2021, just 2 months ago, 320,000 full-time jobs. Statistics are showing that 60% of these entry-level jobs, they're leaving within a couple months. And then just thinking about outside of cannabis, 79% of employees leave their jobs because they feel they haven't been appreciated in their role. And at the end of the day, the main point we're trying to hammer home here is that happy employees serve the customers well, make their customers happy, which makes the customers come back and makes the business owners happy. So keeping that differentiation and treating your people on the inside well is equally as important as treating your customers well. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, good. So we can go back to the conversation. Let's dig right into it. And I think I want to start it off with actually directing to Gareth. You've worked with so many different clients in the space. So I wanted to kind of talk about, from your perspective, you know, gone are the days of these big openings where there's all sorts of media attention and lines out the door for a new dispensary opening in Massachusetts. And we're seeing, you know, big out-of-state companies coming in and they have more budgets to be advertising. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing, kind of the importance of differentiation and how your companies, your clients are differentiating as the market is growing?
Sure. Yeah, happy to, Beth. I think everybody here probably realizes the timing of what was happening before COVID, right? Where we were in terms of the industry and the amount of openings that there was, and then COVID shut things down for a little while. So we have seen since the reopening, which I guess was late last summer, so less than a year, you know, just a real surge in competition of the number of dispensaries that have been open, some brands, you know, that you showed in the previous slide, that, you know, and some products starting to get brand notoriety. And it's evolved really quickly, where, you know, suddenly, depending on where you live in the state, you could have a lot of options for a dispensary to go to. I thought it was really interesting last week's presentation. Jen Flanagan was talking about the licenses, and I don't know how many people picked up on this, but Central and Western Massachusetts have a very heavy concentration of licenses when you compare it to like Suffolk County and say Norfolk County, particularly if you put that up against population, right? You know, with the city of Boston and Cambridge and things like that. So the competition in certain parts of the state is even stronger than in other parts of the state. To that end, what we are seeing clients do now is realizing that they got to tell their story, right? They got to tell their story as to what makes them different. You know, what differentiates them. What is the feel that they want to have? It's funny, having been in so many dispensaries myself, we were struck as we started to visit some of the dispensaries and some of the clients, just the variety of what we saw. You know, there's the ones that feel like a Pottery Barn or feel like an Apple store when you walk in. And then there's the ones that feel more like a club or a bar when you walk in, and it's got that cool vibe. You know, and then there's even ones that are more like, this is the REI outdoor experience, you know, feel. And just thinking about that, like, what is that feel? What is that image that you want to present as your brand? So we can talk more about this, but the specific solutions and things that we see clients pivoting to as a result of all of this, we're doing a lot of video right now. Okay, video is really powerful, right? Show that store experience, show your employees, show happy customers, you know. So we're seeing a lot more use of video than we were initially. Branded content. You know, for those that don't know marketing buzz terms like that, branded content essentially means like, this is content that the client gets to dictate. This is content that the client gets to wrap their brand around and either dictate the story itself or take a piece of content and affiliate their brand with it, as opposed to news coverage. We never know what's going to happen in the news, right? The news is going to change every day. What the news staff needs to cover in regards to the industry is going to change every day. Branded content gives the client a little bit more opportunity to sort of dictate the story that they want to put out there. So those are a couple of the big themes that we're seeing right now.
Thanks, Gareth. I'm going to move along to Alex. As an operator, can you talk to us about, you know, some of the changes that you've seen in retail from when you started and to now. I mean, especially from going back to 2009 when you were working on the products. My goodness, you've lived a 15 lifetimes in cannabis here. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really want to bring to everyone's attention on what I see changing is the actual cannabis consumer and the behavior of consuming, most importantly, buying cannabis. I think that's totally changing. And I'm in my stores on a daily basis talking to customers. I find that to be a great way just to disconnect as a business owner, just to, talk to customers, but at the same time, I'm learning. And one of the things we're learning is gone are the days where someone has to spend $200, $300, $400 on an ounce. They can now spend, $40, $50 and get an eighth, and they don't have to be worried whether their supply will be there or not. It's a much more dependable buying experience that's now risen. We have customers come into our store and they buy a pre-roll every day, one a day. They don't, and for many, that's just part of their habit now, instead of, again, spending a large sum of money. Second, one of the things we hear from customers, or I hear from customers very often, is they're tired of waiting for the cannabis to be brought to their house. So getting in their car and the convenience factor of just going and getting it is totally changing the way they think about cannabis. They don't have to dedicate a half a day to getting it anymore. They can just get it in between an errand or coming home from work, or Friday evening. It's a little bit of an activity. And so that's something we're really seeing change entirely. And that's really fascinating to me. And I continue to monitor that very closely, because our goal as a retailer is really to cater that experience and really make sure we are adapting to what the consumer wants. Because again, for us at the current state in the industry evolution, this word's been used a lot over the last few years, I think, the normalization, but we want to continue to push the envelope of what that really means. And convenience is at the forefront of that. Trust is at the forefront of that. The experience is at the forefront of that. All these things that, probably were lacking before, and now are, because they exist, are changing consumer buying behavior when it comes to cannabis. Not to mention the array of product, right? We just recently looked from, it used to just be flour and pre-rolls. Now it's concentrates, dabbables, edibles, chocolates, gummies. We were one of the very first retailers in the state to just launch ice cream, cannabis infused ice cream. We're now seeing, science playing a bigger role in cannabis product evolution. I think one of my predictions is in 10 years from now, we're going to be laughing, or people will be laughing at the industry, that it took 45 minutes to an hour and a half to feel the edible versus instantaneous satisfaction with nanotechnology that we're seeing now, right? The nano emulsifications. So a lot's happening on the consumer behavior side. And what's interesting is it's changing naturally. So it's interesting to watch the customer naturally changing. It's not being forced onto them. And it's our job to kind of monitor what most people are not monitoring, which is the buying behavior.
Thanks, Alex. And just thinking about the changing consumer and how the products are, they don't look as scary even on the shelves now. We have beautiful packaging. Things don't look as, medicinal or as, toxic as some earlier limitations we're putting on products. So I'd like to shift over to Elias here. Can we talk about, or could you talk please about some of the stifling marketing and advertising regulations for the cannabis licensees, and some of the challenges you experienced as a designer, not just getting through CCC approval, but about, bringing on your creativity, working with your client to get a design approved?
Sure, I would love to answer those. So I think when I was reading over the regulations initially, about cannabis product design, as opposed to just any other designs I've done before, were that, as previously mentioned in the panels, a lot of the regulations were worded very vaguely. It was said that you couldn't use, neon colors or, just to avoid things like graphics that look like people or animals, because they were trying to avoid having any imagery contained that could resonate with children, because apparently that's a key concern, which confuses me as a designer and makes it difficult because, when I ask the question to myself, what do children like, versus what do adults like? It's such a subjective thing. And I think that was the biggest challenge. Was I had a design for the first one that I did for the Star Killer strain. And I had like a pixelated starship as just an idea, right? And so one of my stakeholders saw it and they liked it. But the first thing they said was, I'm just concerned that because it looks video game-esque, it could be, not past legal. And that sort of frustrated me because I noticed it was a compound of stigmas, right? We have the stigma of video games existing only as a product for children now being slapped onto regulations for a product that's for adults, right? So it's almost like we're trying to push back against the idea that adults can't have, mature products that also are fun and look fun. And, it exists in a recreational, accessible manner, but it also exists for patients. And we have to be mindful that people are looking to use this as their medicine, to handle their pain, to handle, cancer, whatever it is, people are using it. And so I think the greatest challenge was sort of walking the line between trying to give the consumer something elegant, something recognizable, and something that gives the strain a little bit of personality, but also not having something that, wouldn't pass legal because it looks too neon, to, things that I guess, alcohol companies could get away with, or what, vaping companies used to have on sort of those types of bottles that they got banned for. But yeah, I think that it just benefits the designer to, be mindful of all the marijuana's place in the community when making all the designs. And that just includes, trying to stay away from, I guess, imagery that would conflict with the image we're trying to bring to marijuana, right? So that can be a difficult thing because it can be very subjective, but everyone kind of has a voice when it comes to, and that's why designing is an iterative process, is because you kind of have to just tiptoe a little bit right now. But the examples that you showed earlier were fine examples of products that we have. So
Great.
okay.
Thanks, Elias. So I want to just ask Gareth and Alex here just about, as the industry is growing and there's more options for people, obviously design is one of those ways to differentiate. And we have the CCC here at Massachusetts regulations that put a lot of restrictions on what cannabis businesses can do. But we're also operating in an online world. There's digital marketing that we're trying to do and connecting with clients over social. So Alex and Gareth, I'd like to open this up to both of you just to comment about some of the limitations that you've experienced, whether it's Gareth working with your clients on, shadow bans on Facebook or blocks or, complete page takedowns. And then also, Alex, have you experienced any of those nefarious little pesky things about trying to market in cannabis? So Gareth, why don't you start there?
Sure. Maybe everybody knows this, but the lack of federal consistency, results in, major platforms like Google and Facebook not being, cannabis friendly platforms to advertise. And certainly that makes it more difficult for cannabis operators to not be able to, use those wildly successful and popular platforms, particularly Google, when somebody's, searching for a certain product or thing. I got to imagine that's going to change here at some point. You tell me when we get federal legalization.
It's coming.
Yeah, we should start a pool, right? I'll tell you, I referenced during my opening remarks, advising the CCC and giving them some input on marketing regulations. I think they did a much better job in the most recent regs released in January, and where they've started now to just focus their energy is really around two issues when it comes to marketing, is not, as Elias referenced there a little bit too, not overtly targeting under age 21. Okay, so they want to be really clear about that. And then the other is not overly making health benefit claims, right? Not making assertive claims, about health benefit. They other than those two issues, they've sort of relaxed a little bit on some of the other stuff, that they've talked about. So, again, just helping our clients, navigate those kinds of things. We could take this in a million directions. So I'll toss it here to Alex for a moment. He can tell you how he's, literally dealing with this. I will say that I think to a certain point, some consumers are always going to operate on convenience, right? I mean, it's going to become a commodity. It's going to be a product like anything else. To some people, it probably already is, right? So I'm going to make my decision based on what I'm driving by, whether they have good parking, things of that nature. To me, the next level is the reduction of the stigma, is the huge amount of market potential for people who have not been cannabis consumers and are now very intrigued when they hear some of the benefits and the stigma drops. Our research, which we did less than a year ago, indicated that a huge percentage of people that were cannabis consumers, legal cannabis consumers in Massachusetts, had been cannabis consumers before it was legal. Okay, so the first people that went and shopped legally were people that were already consuming the product. And I think the next level is that lowering of that stigma and just opening up the market to all kinds of people having previously been consumers. That obviously ladders to all kinds of marketing initiatives and priorities and focuses. How are you going to market to those folks as that evolves daily? So that's it. I'll toss it to Alex.
So Beth, your question is, where are the challenges in traditional online marketing channels? I would say,
and if you've had an experience where you're able to overcome something to help.
Yeah. So what I would say is, obviously, we are constantly getting flagged by Facebook and Instagram, even when there are no posts relating to cannabis at all. It's clearly just bought at this point. So that's a bit of a frustration. And then obviously trying to communicate with these types of organizations is nearly impossible as well. So you can't even kind of make your case. So we are very cautious and conscious of every post we make. One of the things we strive to present is not we are a dispensary, but that we are a lifestyle brand that happens to have dispensaries. And I think most of our marketing content that we try and strive to create is catered to that lifestyle of enjoyment and happiness and relaxation and gathering and friendship, and that, like, the good things about life is really what I want to capture in my brand and in the lifestyle. And so that helps us navigate through things. But we've had issues, with a service called MailChimp, if you're familiar with it. If you're in business, MailChimp is the silverback gorilla of emailing for us. They flagged us. They said that we couldn't work with them. And yet I see companies on a daily send me emails using MailChimp that are also cannabis companies. So sometimes you just have to, not sometimes, I think you always have to just kind of go with the flow, and you have to be smart, and you need to be tactical and scrappy. And I think for us, that plays to our advantage as a company, because we are smaller. We are a locally owned company. We're a Massachusetts focused retailer. We are much more nimble. We're much more creative. I'm involved in lots of the marketing aspects of the business. So we can be much more scrappy, and we're much more connected to our communities, which helps us. So, I think we're now sort of resurrecting out of the COVID era, hopefully. And I think a lot of businesses, small business owners are still hurting and struggling to get off their feet. And we are doing we are coming up with creative ideas to engage, to help promote these businesses around us. You know, we're talking to many, many local businesses every day to figure out creative ways to just collaborate, because as Gareth pointed out, competition is coming. And, you know, I love the fact that people travel to our stores, but I'm much, much more focused on my neighborhood and on my community that I'm servicing. And that's really the driver of our brand.
Thank you, Alex. And that kind of goes into where I wanted to direct us next, talking about community and certain demographics. We'll kick off just kind of where you left off, Alex, there, and particularly where you have your dispensary locations in multiple locations and different types of communities. You're in Worcester, you're in Abington, and then Watertown. Talk about a different mix of you know, communities to try to create a cohesive brand. But can you talk maybe a little bit more about why local community engagement is so important at this crossroads, I suppose, for the industry?
Loaded question. I'll do my best to answer them. I would say, to the first point you made, you know, one of our disadvantages as being a retailer is we don't really always get to dictate where our retails will be. You know, we're sort of shooting in the dark, hoping we get an approval, hoping we can get the opportunity. And so you're absolutely right. All three of our locations are very different. But we tried to what we did is when we created our brand and we created our vision, we sort of elevated it up and said, okay, no matter where we land, we're still a community of New Englanders. We still share many similar things, no matter where we live in Massachusetts. You know, we all experience Cape Cod. We all know what we're doing for the most part on a Sunday during the fall. You know, we all have similar things that we share as a community, because community can be small, but it can be large. And, you know, you always find your community depending on what you're measuring it against. You know, so if you're in Connecticut, your community is Massachusetts. If you're in Europe, your community is America. And it goes up and downward on that scale. So to us, in building Bud's brand, it's really focused on the hardworking New Englander, which is, I think, the core of what New Englanders are. You know, we're a little bit rougher around the edges because we have our brutal winters, but we also enjoy life and, you know, appreciate the 4 seasons. And so we're really trying to capture all of that in our brand. What was your second question?
No, I think you pretty much wrapped it up there. I'm going to go to Elias next to kind of drill down a little bit more into targeting and engaging community.
Oh, your community, the community component to your question. Sorry.
You want to add something?
Yeah, I want to add one more thing. I think naturally and organically for me, because I grew up in Worcester, there's a lot of passion and pride in it. And so it's much greater than just a business endeavor. It's a personal endeavor. It's an endeavor to try to make a difference, because my sister lives down the street. My dad lives, 10 minutes away. So there are all these elements where the community is so important, because it is my community. It's not just the community I'm in.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Alice. And I think the broader community in general is a little bit more, to use the term the kids are using, woke. People are more in tune with social movements. They're obviously learning more about cannabis as it becomes more accessible. But a very influential kind of subset of our communities and of our customers for cannabis are the millennials. So I wanted, Elias, you had some really interesting take on, appealing to millennials, breaking through the noise for them. So I'd like to just see if you can share your thoughts on, branding and really getting through to millennials in this loud cannabis marketplace.
Sure. Yeah. And thank you for the question. I actually really appreciated what Shalem actually said in the previous panel. If people got to tune into that one, she mentioned about how it was difficult to even talk about cannabis right now without, also kind of alluding to the current political climate in the world. I think that's very true. Personally, as someone who identifies as a transgender male, and I'm 31, but I look like I'm 17, so I'm dealing with this thing all the time. I find that just, the role of marijuana is very important in a lot of communities, especially ones, in cities like Boston. I'm actually from Georgia. So I've been living in Boston since 2012. And, I've just noticed how many different neighborhoods are greatly impacted negatively by, being targeted. So I think that what we can do with art in, advertising is help the customer decide how they feel about your company when they see your packaging and the quality of your packaging and the amount of thought that's put into the art on it. Something that I said earlier that I really appreciated about Mayflower was they had the opportunity to start some social impact programs. And the fact that they did that actually attracted me to them as a customer living in Brighton, as opposed to some other dispensary choices that I have nearby. So I feel like if there are other kids, kids, I use the word, but millennials my age, and they're looking to support the cannabis industry, I think that a lot of people recognize, how many people have had to suffer in order for cannabis to become legal and to have these, almost Apple Store-esque looking dispensaries. We're asking when we're buying these products, where is our money going? Is it going back into the community? Is it going to pay for schools? I think I was very excited initially to hear about the taxes on it and that where the taxes would go, back into the community. So I'm a little bit different from Alex, where it's not exactly, where I'm from here, but I do, the older I get, the more I care very much about keeping the money that I spend, ideally more locally, and just kind of building back up where we are and helping people be less afraid. Because even though people can now get it legally recreationally, and as a patient, it is still illegal to smoke it outside. So even if you wanted to gather with friends, you're at risk there. You're at risk in your apartment if you're doing it. You're at risk, if it looks like you're giving it to someone. So there are still so many laws and people suffering around it that I think if companies just even put 5 or 10% of some of their effort into showing their customers that they want it to be more than about just selling that product, it will take the company that much farther. And I think the community will respond, in turn by saying, yes, I want to support, this company that, wants to uplift artists, a new artist every couple of months, or, could basically elevate someone in the community who may have a chance to develop skills. So yeah, that's pretty much my answer on that.
Thanks, Elias. And then I just wanted to kind of we've talked about, customers and community, but let's just kind of, to wrap this up, let's take a look inside and talk about the people that we're hiring, corporate culture, and how that can differentiate a company in the marketplace as well. And I want to start off going to Alex and then ask Gareth and Elias as well for their input. And we'll probably then go to audience Q&A. We've had a couple come in here. Obviously I talked about it before, employee turnover is a major problem in the cannabis industry. So Alex, what's Buds Goods doing to change corporate culture and really keep these employees engaged instead of, training to go off to your competition? You want to add anything about corporate culture?
Yeah, I think, again, because we are a smaller privately owned company, we're able to connect and be more transparent with our staff on a daily basis. And so I think we do an incredible job of allowing all of our employees to talk to anybody, and we're really trying to build a family culture ultimately, right? We're on this mission together as a collective, and everyone understands their roles are important, and it all needs to come together for this ship to set sail. We make tremendous investments into knowledge, investments, making sure staff, as crazy as it sounds, making sure staff is aware of all the products we have and trying products and having access to it without, spending it out of their own pocket. That meant, being familiar with both the menu, but also the business operations. I try to make sure we're constantly educating our staff so they understand cannabis as a business and they understand what the word regulation means and to what extent that's an important component. So as much investment as we put into their knowledge on the cannabis side, but also as business-minded individuals. And I think our staff really reflects on our level of transparency with them. We tell them when things are good. We tell them the challenges we're facing. We tell them when things are, rocky and we need their help. And most importantly, we try to emphasize that here's an opportunity that could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I try to stress this to everybody. And it's, this is an opportunity where hard work and dedication pays off. And if you make that investment into yourself, then you can achieve things in this industry, because the hierarchy of this industry has not yet been created, and the pyramid of business itself is still continuing to grow. And so I think we do a great job conveying that to our staff, that it's a lot of people want to be in the cannabis industry. So A, you should feel proud that you've accomplished that. And then B, to understand and express to them that timing is very important to careers success. And so when you get in early at something, it doesn't guarantee success, but it increases the chances of success significantly. And so just constantly, engaging with staff and making sure they're heard, and making sure that they feel like they're a part of the brand is so important to me. And, I try to make sure individually, as the CEO, that I'm giving people my attention and my time, and I always respond to everybody's email and, staff question if I'm not in the store within 48 or 72 hours, where am I? So I think it's because we're a close-knit, smaller company that we're able to continue to build a really strong culture, because at the end of the day, the energy we put into our employees is the energy they're going to put into our customers. And that's everything to us as a retailer, because the majority of people come back to us, not because of the way our store looks or the selection. It's because they've made a friend or a bud, at our store, and they trust that individual, and they're going to continue to trust that individual. And it's our job to make sure that individual is happy and has the tools and the resources to be successful on their own self-pursuit in this industry. I always tell people it's okay to be selfish. Just make sure you're selfish and it's creating good things for others out there. You should strive to be a good employee, not because you want to do good for the company, but because you're investing your own individual time, and thus you should strive for greatness, and that greatness will benefit the company that you work for.
I love it. All right, we are just about done here, so I just want to go quickly to a couple audience questions, and I think this first one, Gareth, maybe you can help with. We have Yasway asked, I'm curious about marketing through text messages. Are there concerns around that? Is Mass Live doing anything with SMS marketing, Gareth?
We're not.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
no, hasn't been a viable or safe solution yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alex or Elias?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just wanted to say thank you for bringing that up, because that's just another example of legislation that's existing that affects, again, I think, like, people of color specifically and people in lower classes. And I just want to specify that because, to not be able to communicate someone's order through text message, and now these companies are having to resort to email, having an email is less accessible. Having Wi-Fi is less accessible. So the people being affected by that policy and, pulling back on text messaging, and now they're cracking down on text messages, we know who that affects, because we know that it doesn't affect the rich and the privileged. So I think that's a really great question to ask. And it's definitely something to be aware of.
I just add one thing to that. I agree with what you said, Elias, but I also want to give people the perspective that SMS and text messaging as a marketing solution for other industries is not successful very largely either. People don't want an advertising message in their text thread is largely our experience. So we're not even selling that solution outside of the cannabis industry. That doesn't in any way discount what Elias says. His point there is very valid, but we don't see it as a super effective marketing solution for anybody.
Can I also?
It seems to be effective for like having fans that really want that text and are really connected to the brand. But yeah, I've unsubscribed to a bunch too. Alex, you want to add something about texts?
Yeah, well, marketing channels in general, I think one of the things we're learning is it is a challenge. So what ends up happening, in my opinion, is as these channels continue to sort of open up, the whole industry floods into it. Like, look at billboards. Look how many billboards are around. Look, the amount of text messages I get, because I sign up for all of them, it's astronomical. So what happens is these marketing tools become very quickly ineffective because they're overly saturated immediately. And so my advice to anybody listening is it's very easy to identify what you can do. The question then becomes, what can I do that those don't know yet? And that's the space you want to play in as an operator. And again, marketing at the end of the day is you have to focus on which channels you want to market towards and target it, because you want to start finding out some specifics in what you're learning in marketing. And I think you're going to spend a lot of marketing, in my opinion, today. Yes, it's trying to create awareness for our brand, but it also is for us to learn about customers in general and what they're reacting to and what's driving their decision making and what product, why is this package that doesn't look as attractive to me more successful than this same exact product, but with a different package that's less attractive, but yet the sales are greater here than there. But ultimately, I think it's really important to think more on the marketing side, on guerrilla strategies, creative strategies, and to sort of, think through smarter avenues of how to spend marketing budgets, because it's very easy to spend it for the obvious solutions that are out there today.
Okay, thank you, Alex. All right, we are officially over time. So just to end this out, and there was one other question relating to education and job prep for cannabis, and I've got that one covered. So I will respond to Nichelle, who had written that. So stay tuned there. But let's just close this out. Just go around, let folks know how they can find you if they want to follow up. And you're welcome to put any sort of like social or emails into the chat for people. But let's start with Gareth. How can folks follow up with you for more information about Mass Live Media or your services?
Yep, thank you. I want to leave you all with a quick thought, okay? We asked consumers in Massachusetts last year, we phrased this question to them. All cannabis dispensaries in Massachusetts are the same. Only 40% of respondents disagreed with that statement. Less than half disagreed with that statement, okay? A huge 60% either said that statement is true or I'm at least indifferent to it. We're gonna ask that question again in a month or two, and it's gonna be interesting to see what they say, okay? gcharter@masslive.com, or just go to masslivemedia.com. I trust you're all going to masslive.com already to read the news, but masslivemedia.com is our agency side. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. And Elias, tell us how folks can get in touch with you if they want to follow up and commission you to do some beautiful artwork.
Yeah, sure thing. You can catch my website. It's eliasdiesler.com. My email's up there. You can also get my latest design for the pineapple upside down cake strain at Mayflower medicinal locations in Worcester and Brighton, or Alston, excuse me. Yeah, so feel free to shoot me an email.
All right, thank you, sir. And Alex, finally, how can folks find, well, we know Worcester, Abington, soon to be Watertown, but.
If anyone ever wants to send me an email, it's very simple, alex@budsgoods.com. I recommend everyone come visit us at our store. Follow us on social media @budsgoods. that's the best way to really just come and experience what we've created. I think it's a very unique retail experience and cannabis experience.
All right, thank you. And Beth Waterfall, bethwaterfall.com, and I'm at Beth Waterfall on social. Happy to connect and always excited to, talk about marketing cannabis. And as you can see, we kind of only scratched the surface on a bunch of stuff here. I had about 20 other questions that we could have gone through. So thank you to this awesome panel today. It was great to have this conversation with you. Appreciate your candor and your generosity of thought and collaboration. And just gonna hand everything over to Monica to close this out. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you to all of our speakers and panelists today for sharing your insight and industry know-how with our audience. Special thanks again to Beth Waterfall for her longtime collaboration with us on this annual event, and as well our corporate sponsors, Bowditch & Dewey, Lighthouse Biz Solutions LLC, a subsidiary of GFA Federal Credit Union, and our community supporters, Elevate Northeast and Mass Live Media. Just a reminder that we'll include a link to this recording and the June 16 session recording, along with some additional helpful links in a follow-up email to all attendees. Thank you all for joining us and have a great afternoon.